Okay, I think maybe let's get started. Everyone ready? Yes? Okay, cool. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our DVT Insights session. I am Liz Spangenberg. I am the head of design at DVT. So here at DVT, we have regular insight sessions to provide thought leadership and identification of opportunities in technology for business today. So we also have a section on the DVT website, so dvt.co.za, where we host previous DVT Insights sessions. A previous one that we did recently was on Business Agility 101. Those sessions, there were 3 of them, are available on the website. You can go and have a look at them. And also upcoming sessions will be advertised there. And then we have a host of great topics and great speakers that you can learn from. So to get down to today's talk, Design for Business Sake, our speaker today is Chiselle Beukes. She is one of our UX, UI designers, also a delivery manager. So she has acquired a unique career experience in design and business. She's been involved in the management of multiple organizations, and she has extensive experience in graphic and user experience design. So she's uniquely qualified to share her insights on the relationship between business, design, and project success. She has a special place in her heart for animals of all kinds that do not have scales. She is not the best golfer, but she enjoys hacking her way through 18 holes every now and then. But overall, a good series, snacks, her hubby and her dogs are a few of her favorite things. So just a few things for the session today. Chiselle is going to get started, give us her amazing talk. After that, we're going to have 15 minutes for Q&A. So please feel free to write your questions in the chat section of Zoom. I will moderate the questions and ask them to Chiselle at the end, and throughout the session, maybe answer some questions here and there where I can. And here we go. Take it away, Chiselle.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Liz. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Are you able to see that on your side, Liz?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome. Great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chiselle. I'm a contractor for DVT. And just to give everyone a bit of context on my background, Liz did speak to it. I started off my career in designing corporate identities, vehicle wraps, flyers, billboards, etc., etc. And after that, I was given the opportunity to work for a business owner who had been the CEO of a major retailer for many years. And he needed someone to run his property businesses. During my time with him, he acquired and started more and more businesses. And as he did so, my business acumen grew. It was quite a steep learning curve, but aren't most of the learning curves worth being on generally quite steep? What I learned along the way was that no matter whether a business's main focus was on its clientele, its staff, or its deliverables, every decision came with weighing up its business value. Even the smallest decision's ultimate return, if it was negative, the decision would sway the other way. After being exposed to the different aspects of business, and as much as I tried to avoid doing so, after learning how to balance the books, I decided to see where the design industry was since I'd left it. I like the idea of UX design, which was a term which had kind of been knocking around the industry. It was fairly new at the time. And I like the idea of being able to use my understanding of what makes business sense as a tool in design. That, along with the problem-solving skills that I had developed over the years, was something that I decided I'd like to explore further. The deeper I got into the design world, the more it became apparent that there's a gap in understanding between business and design. Businesses haven't quite been given a clear understanding of the direct business value of good design, while designers perhaps need to understand what value they offer the organizations themselves and not solely the end user. Today, I'd like to discuss the value of design by exploring its relationship with business and understanding why design makes business sense. So first off, To simplify the idea and provide a more descriptive connection between design and development, I'd like to liken the relationship between design and development to the relationship between an architect and a project's builders. What design does is the same way that an architect lays out specifications and blueprints, considering everything from doors and windows to the distance from the garage to the entrance of the home, things like the required depth of the foundation, the thickness of the walls to ensure that the home is warm and eco-friendly, considerations that the builders themselves may overlook as they are focused on the brick and mortar, as they should be. A house is more than 4 walls and a roof. The same goes for software. User experience designers provide a clear guide to developers that mitigates development issues and maximizes on budget for stakeholders. The same way that architects need to speak to the builders, electricians, plumbers to ensure the desired outcome is achieved, ensuring the success of a software development project is heavily weighted on how well the team works together. Stakeholders are a huge part of the team. When designers are in an environment where they're given access to communicate with developers and stakeholders to create a shared holistic understanding of the project's goals, the result will be a house that stands for generations to come. Through the design of a well thought out user interface that's easy to develop and interact with, designers are able to simplify the development process. Using technologies like Sketch, InVision, Figma, and Zeppelin, and there's multiple more technologies out there, designers are able to create seamless user interaction requirements. They're also able to provide components and design libraries which result in faster build times, consistent interfaces which perpetuate the brand identity and ultimately budget-conscious development. Now, let's look at the difference between user experience design and user interface design. User experience design, the aim is to successfully fulfill the user's needs. It's user-focused. Providing positive user experiences keeps a user loyal to a product, brand, or company. Additionally, a meaningful user experience allows you to define customer journeys within your product that are most conducive to business success, minimizing user confusion and getting to the resolution of the user problem without unnecessary fuss. Provision of consistent design systems. User experience is not only important in customer-facing products, but also in internal systems that help create efficient, constructive work environments. Now, user interface design, the focus is creating simple user interfaces. The goal is to create user interfaces that are easy to learn and easy to use. A good design requires a good balance between maximizing functionality and maintaining simplicity through progressive disclosure of information, meaning a user is taken on a journey of discovery rather than being bombarded with too much information too soon, which may be overwhelming, which sometimes we can actually liken this to trying to teach an older person, perhaps in an old age home, to start learning how to use a Mac when they've always just used a cell phone, perhaps a Nokia. Sometimes it just gets too overwhelming. There's too much going on, where good design helps a user to be exposed to it slowly and not feel like they should just give up. Good design means that a user shouldn't have to overthink what they're trying to achieve using your software. The user should be able to recognize patterns and features and intuitively use the product without any additional guidance. This can be developed more and more as designers provide consistency between products in an organization, and users will learn how to interact with a range of products with the same brand identity. The creation of user-controlled interfaces that are intuitive results in less need for expensive training, especially when considering internal software. The understanding of the software will no longer live within a select few individuals' heads and will rather create an opportunity for all users to add value. Now, let's look at the design process. Empathizing and learning about the users of the software through research or observation techniques is the goal here is to identify the user's needs and ensure the right problem is being solved, or that the solution identified by business does appropriately solve the problem that the users are actually facing. Ideation. It is important to incorporate perspectives from designers as well as stakeholders to decide on the best business solution. This step doesn't only result in the best ideas, but creates buy-in from stakeholders and users early on in the process, minimizing rework later. No ideas here are bad ideas in this phase. Ideation is building castles in the sky and then building bridges to achieve the desired outcome. Dream big. The most viable product will come from everyone participating and building a vested interest in the project's outcome. This step helps give stakeholders a good, tangible idea of how the final product would look and function before any code is written. It gives the users and stakeholders a chance to visualize the final project, allows for changes to be made early, which saves time and expenditure on modifications that are only implemented during the development phase of a project. Testing. It's important to test the ease of use of the product or software. Identifying usability issues early allows for these issues to be addressed before development begins. The testing process also locks in buy-in from the end user and the stakeholders. When users feel they have a say in the outcome of the product, that they are way more willing to accept change, whereas they may have been averse to it earlier on. So let's discuss some of the design deliverables. Personas are 2 to 3 fictional characters which are identified during the research phase. Personas identify the users that will be interacting with the product. It's important to have a face behind the solution that you're trying to build. Many case studies on homelessness and school failure rates show that just by identifying actual human problems and solving the issues that those real humans are experiencing, rather than grouping them into perceived groups or social structures, reduced homelessness by 90% in Utah in the United States, and reduced the high school dropout rate by 50% in a rural school in Indiana. Next up, we have empathy. Understanding the user is the most important factor in the user experience process. Without empathy, software and products are developed hoping to overcome a perceived user problem, and many unintentionally miss the target through inability to connect with the desired users. Products, whether developed internally or externally, always have a user, and without their buy-in, the desired outcome cannot be fully achieved. Many expensive hours spent on development can easily be wasted if the product is not user-friendly. Rework on a project that is already in development is time and cost intensive and can be avoided by creating user buy-in early, and ease of use for the user will ultimately benefit the stakeholders by not only having a great product, which their users love, but a product that has a long shelf life. Building a sitemap helps developers and users to visualize the product's content and how information is grouped within the software. Using the sitemap, a user journey can be created to help visualize the steps a user takes to complete a task or achieve a goal. Identifying and reflecting on how users navigate will help you meet their needs more efficiently. A wireframe is a user interface stripped of any visual design or branding elements. It defines the hierarchy of items on a screen and communicates what items should be on a screen based on user needs. Iterations can be performed much faster using wireframes. The focus is not on visual appeal here, only of the design functionality and whether that works instead of how the colors work together, which is generally something that clients or the users can attach to, because it's something that they can control. So it's better to give them something blank, something easy to change, something that generally on paper with a pencil that you can just erase and change together. This creates a lot of work with the client where they can also buy into the final product. The purpose of a UI is to enable a user to effectively control a computer or machine that they're interacting with, and for feedback to be received in order to communicate effective completion of tasks. Although user stories in software development are usually heavily reliant on effective business analysts, user experience designers are able to refine the requirements, ensuring that all the feedback that the user requires when executing tasks and what should happen in the event that a task fails, or if a user unintentionally performs an action, that all these have been considered and has been explicitly described to developers. Interactive prototypes allow the stakeholders, developers, and users to effectively understand how the user should be able to interact with the software. Through the design process, the designer can provide the developers with components such as buttons, search bars, tables, and many more that allow the developers to insert the components into their software rather than having to recreate them from scratch. The designer is also able to provide the developer with icons, text, and font requirements, as well as color palettes. Design systems provide consistency and increase development efficiency. All of this ultimately results in a faster and simplified development process. Allowing the designer to work closely with the developers during the research as well as the implementation phase allows for rock-solid solutions and a successful project outcome. I'm now going to talk you through a quick demo on the deliverables that we achieved during a technical analysis for a large software project that we're currently implementing at one of our clients. The technical analysis phase allowed the user experience design team, as well as the development lead and the systems architect, to work very closely while ideating solutions to the problem that we had been asked to solve. I'm not going to go through the nitty-gritty of the actual project, but I'm rather going to focus on how the design process has helped us to achieve much faster development so far. It's important to keep in mind that the two videos I'm about to show you were achieved without any code being implemented. First up, I'll show you the interactions demo, which was done at the end of the technical analysis phase to present one small part of a much bigger proposed solution. The idea was to show the stakeholders the outcome of all the research and iterations that had already been done. And then secondly, I'll show you a small demo on what the resulting Zeppelin file looks like. And Zeppelin is an application used to translate the designs into components and design guides that developers are able to implement. So I'll first start with the interactions demo. And it's just important to note as well that all the client information has been removed from the interactions demo. So you'll see that there may be some blank boxes over where a logo might have otherwise been, just to protect the client's privacy. So we're looking at a screen that through the research process was discovered that users were unable to add information for more than one day at a time. So much data is captured by the user weekly, and by forcing the user to input information one day at a time, the process had become laborious and resulted in time that could have been spent on more important tasks being spent on admin. This is the reason we have a date selector, which allows users to view and input data for multiple days, also allowing the users to export information for much larger date periods rather than having to amalgamate information in an external application such as Excel. Users also have to scroll left and right and up and down on the screen because there's so much information that needs to be displayed in the table. We maximized on real estate by allowing for a menu which expands and contracts, and hence we were able to eliminate left and right scrolling completely. all the interactions are clearly visible, such as what happens when the user clicks on the search bar, the ability to hover over the selections, how they are highlighted as well as type in the search bar, how the date picker interacts, what happens when the user hovers over different dates. This is all important to stakeholders as well as developers. Developers need all this information to understand how to build the interactions, and users need this in order to understand that what they are interacting with on the screen is reacting in the way that they expect it to. The screen shows how the different statuses of data appear within the table and clearly displays the cells which are able to be edited. The ability to add additional rows of data by clicking on the separating line between the rows is also shown. This was a requirement identified in the current inability of the system to allow users to enter missing data that should have been captured in the middle of the day but was somehow overlooked. It was also identified through on-site observations of users that the old system required the users to enter data cell by cell, which was also a laborious and time-consuming task. In the new system, users are able to copy and paste data from applications such as Excel, which is also expressed in the demo, to ensure that it is properly catered for in the requirements, and for users to be able to see the benefits of the new functionality. The user is able to save data to the database and receives a confirmation that the task was successful, as you can see at the bottom here. No coding was done at this point. This is all purely an outcome of the design process and the development of empathy through user observation and interviews. Now let's go back to the Zeppelin demonstration to understand the use of design in terms of the development in more detail. We'll begin with the more obvious guides for the developer, which aids in the speed of development, which is the provision of a style guide. A style guide is a holistic set of standards that defines your company's branding, forms a style guide. Designers are able to develop design systems which bring order to chaos. They provide a more structured and standardized way of building solutions to product problems. Excuse me. Solutions to product problems in order to create uniformity in an organization's product offering. Developers will be able to use a defined color palette, text style catalog, and components. Menus, icons, buttons, tables, form components can all be created by designers and handed over to developers. Screens linked to user stories are also supplied, which is not only beneficial in front-end development, but is also, it's great for back-end users, well, back-end developers to be able to see actual screens, which helps them to understand the desired outcome of the user story, because sometimes just the text of the user story cannot tell a back-end developer exactly what the screen is meant to respond like. So if they know that, okay, the front end needs a pop-up, they know what to build in the back end to make sure that that trigger comes through to the front end, so that when the front end developer picks it up, he's able to pick up that trigger easier. When clicking on the screens, developers are able to see the CSS code, as you can see on the right-hand side when I click on the screens, as well as links back to the components that make up that screen. The designer is also able to add comments into the screens that ensure that developers don't miss anything from the user story, such as requirements that are specific to only one screen. Overall, the developers are able to write code faster and build a tangible product quicker than ever before. This project, for example, was able to provide a tangible working front end in the first 2-week sprint. This does not mean that it provided a front end without fault, but rather a product that was able to display business value quickly. Okay, so now let's look at the return on investment of user experience design. Investment in good user experience is a direct investment in the competitive growth of one's organization. The most innovative companies in the world share one thing in common. They use design as an integral resource for innovation. design-driven companies have outperformed S&P by 288% over the past 10 years. By increasing the research that's gone into the decisions made in building the right software solutions, as well as providing developers with all the requirements necessary when building software, user experience design can decrease development time exponentially. Since usability has been considered, interfaces should be intuitive and simple, and hence cut down customer service requests. This results not only in less of a requirement for customer service, but frees up time for customer service consultants to focus on problems that may be affecting other areas of the business. Time spent on iterations of solutions done by user experience designers early on in the development process minimizes the amount of rework by developers. As requirements change or solutions need to be rethought later in the process, this is not only saving development time, but ultimately decreases the overall cost of development. 70% of projects fail due to lack of user experience. Understanding that every system has been perfectly designed to produce the outputs that it produces means that if users are struggling to get the desired outcome from a piece of software, somewhere within the system lies the answer, and it doesn't lie in the outputs, it lies somewhere upstream. Refocusing on upstream thinking through user experience design can increase the chance of project success by fully understanding what the system requires in order for it to produce the desired outputs. So with that, we can now go into any questions that perhaps anybody has thought of as I've gone through this. I know that it was a lot of information in a very short period of time, so please feel free to send any messages in the chat.
Thank you so much, Chiselle. That was really insightful. And I think it gives us a good basic knowledge of where user experience and user interface design comes from and the value that it can have for business. So our first question comes from Sinisha, and she would like to know whether Zeppelin requires training to use it at the level that you showed in the presentation.
So to be completely honest, I YouTubed how to use Zeppelin. You can plug it straight into Sketch, which is what I use, but you can also use it in almost all design software. And it's through that plugin, when you export the screens, it exports it with the CSS code that creates that screen. So it's literally just something that is communicating your design into development talk, rather than you needing to learn how to code that CSS.
Great. Any more questions, anyone? Please do feel free to add them in the chat. Oh, we have another question from Cole. Have you seen UX and UI deliverables feed into change management on projects?
Yes, definitely. Especially when it comes down to your site maps and your actual planning. What we've now realized on this project that I did show the example of earlier was that a lot of the UX research that was done is now feeding into the user manuals, like I said, the site maps, how the product actually works. So it's not obviously a full, turnkey, this is the end product, but what it does do is say, this was the problem, have we solved the problem? And now when we're writing the manual, it's actually making that a lot easier.
That definitely makes sense. Thank you. Another question. From business sponsors, what have been the aha moments on the value of UX and UI design ahead of development and then getting it done?
So I think the biggest part was, like I said, it's so important that you are close to stakeholders. So UX design isn't always, the aha moment doesn't always come with the design itself. What it comes with is the research that goes into spending time with the people who are going to use the product. And generally you'll come back with, a business has identified this as the issue, but yes, the user can see that that's perhaps what's slowing them down. But behind the scenes, if you could solve a much simpler problem for them, you would give them a lot more business value. They'd be able to perform their job a bit faster. They would have more time to actually help in other areas of the business. So there's a lot of moments there where business realizes, okay, so we haven't spent enough time with our users, and we could solve a much easier solution. Perhaps we don't need this massive system. Maybe we can fix this one problem and then focus on a bigger solution later on. So there's a bit more speed in terms of business value. We can turn over a bit more in our sprints than rather just trying to focus on one massive picture. Our MVP products come out a little bit easier during the design process.
Cool. Next question. What are the biggest hurdles that you have faced in UX or UI engagements?
So I think it's business buy-in. Generally, it has been before, I think, especially in the beginning when the business value of UX isn't as apparent, because it does take a couple of weeks of spending time with users. And that is probably the biggest part. Also, perhaps getting developers to work with you on the solution. Sometimes they do have an idea of what they would like to do, because, you know, developers have got a lot of experience in terms of what they've done as their solution before, and they would like to use the same thing. So it is building a good relationship with your team, so your software team, your development team, your architect, as well as the stakeholders and the business owners, to be able to communicate a bit better and get them to come up with ideas with you. So probably buy-in is the most difficult, but if you can get them to ideate with you, then once that buy-in obstacle is overcome, generally everyone's then on the same page.
That ties in perfectly to a comment that Dion made on here, which is that I think it's key to understand the business's strategy to ensure that we design products that both align to strategy as well as the user needs. And I think that's exactly what you were saying, is we need to make sure that we're not just designing for design's sake. The design needs to tie in into the business aspects of it.
Exactly. And if you can communicate to business that you do care about them just as much as you care about the end user, it creates a good relationship.
What would you say makes for a great UX or UI designer, besides from being a clone of you, of course?
I think what really makes a difference is ability to come up with solutions that are not ones that you would normally default to. So I know that this probably means innovation, but not always. You know, sometimes you have to be able to meet a waterfall client at a waterfall client. You know, not everybody is open to complete change and working in a big tech environment. So if you are able to adjust how you work to fit your client and make them feel comfortable, I think that is invaluable to business.
It's very true. Like, designers need to meet the business people on the business side on their terms and really engage with them to understand what their needs are. So a question from Dominic. What would you suggest for small businesses who cannot afford to go through a thorough UX design process?
So I know that, it would be nice to always be able to afford, a straight up UX designer to come on and that's, all they do. But if you could even just speak to a consultant and ask, what are the big questions that we should be asking? Give yourself a little bit of a roadmap of where you should be looking. And although, some companies might be giving that away for free on their chats, I'm trying to think of what it's called. There's some blogs that people write up of like, this is generally the path that I follow. And if you could just engage with the person who's going to be using the product that you're trying to create without any preconceived notions. I know that generally business knows what the issue is, but go in thinking like it could be absolutely anything. It could just be that this person's computer is actually broken. It's got nothing to do with the product. Just listen to who is going to be using the product and you'll generally be on the right path. There's so many resources out there and a lot of companies that would be willing to even just come in from an advice perspective, give you a bit of a layout, perhaps do a technical analysis phase rather than an implementation phase for you, give you a little bit of a quick breakdown of what they find, and then you can go from there rather than doing a long, maybe costly initiative that small businesses maybe can't afford.
That's a very good point. And to that, just to punt DVT services a little bit, we do, and I think most other companies do as well, but I'm going to punt us now. We do technical analyses for clients before starting big projects, and that's usually 2, 3, 4 weeks, depending on what we think it would be, just to go and investigate and just to find out a bit what are the client's actual needs, and then starting to pinpoint those things. So not solving anything yet, not designing what the final solution would look like, but just investigating and having interviews with the stakeholders, maybe with some of the users, and really just understanding what's going on in the business. And then we can advise on best practice. And that's usually a fixed cost for that specific time period. So that gives you the benefit of engaging with designers and having some insight without necessarily having to commit to an entire project, which might be quite costly if you're a small business that can't afford that. So that is something to consider that we do very happily do and do enjoy doing. So yes, that definitely is a possibility. And as Chiselle said, there are, if you attend UX conferences or talks from meetups and so on, very often people will be giving advice and talking through their own experiences, case studies of what they've done for projects, which you might be able to take learnings from in order to use in your own business. Cool. Next question from Quentin. Have you been able to measure the value of upfront consideration of UX UI and how best to position that based on the perceived business value?
So just to confirm that I'm understanding correctly, it's how best to position UX to the business, or
so I think
what the value is?
Two parts to the question. So the first part is, have you been able to measure the value of upfront consideration of UX UI? So that's the first part. So I think speak to that maybe first.
Perhaps in terms of numbers value, I haven't got it in numbers, but the value in terms of time and deliverables is definitely able to be seen. For example, without the UX, like I said in this past project, with the first 2-week sprint, we were able to have a front end, which is generally, quite rare. It's, the front end is a big build. And that is invaluable to stakeholders. Stakeholders generally, they don't understand the back-end code. They're not really there for the development side. They want to see the product working. So the value that a UX designer can bring in terms of support for a front-end developer, if you're able to get them the screens and exactly how everything needs to be used, if in 2 weeks you're able to have a front end that a stakeholder can view, it is, although maybe to us who understand that like how much more valuable, you know, the calculations and the code and everything is, the stakeholder is looking, okay, cool, I can see this product. So it is more for longevity of the product than for the back end and actually what you want the product to be able to do. Because stakeholders are ultimately the ones who decide, are we going into this next sprint, or is it's not valuable for them?
And I think that answers the second half of the question is, how do you best position that value based on the perceived business value? And I think what you were saying about you're allowing the stakeholders to actually see how this interaction will work before you have to spend time and money on building it, that answers that. I don't know if you have anything more that you want to add there.
No, I agree with you. It really is just for stakeholders to be able to understand what is being built, and it's something tangible. They're not just looking at lines of code.
Definitely, yes. Okay. In recent engagement, are you seeing that business organizations are creating competitive advantage from undertaking UX and UI redesign for existing digital channels?
So I would like to maybe use just Microsoft Teams, even as an example. I don't know if anyone remembers what it was like at the beginning of lockdown when we all started using Teams. And it just really didn't work. But just immediately, I wouldn't say that Microsoft, Teams is 100% yet, but it has been very iteratively being fixed. You can see how they are using the design process to be able to bring out features that benefit their client. And it may not just be, it may not be something massive. They may just change where the menu is, but it's something that they are realizing we're going to be using this product more often, and they're slowly fixing it. It's happened with Slack. It's happening with all design-driven companies. Small changes are coming out quickly. You may even notice on your phone, there's been a lot more updates. The update maybe installs a little bit faster, and you don't notice what it is, but perhaps your speaker's a little bit louder than it was before. There's a lot of value in just improving your user experience just a little bit. It may keep that user around, and it may make them trust your product more than they did before that problem was there.
Very true. It's those small little things that people add that creates user satisfaction and just that moment of happiness where you're like, that's unexpected. I'm going to keep using this.
Yeah, they see me.
Exactly. It's all about having the person feel seen, as you say, and just experiencing that they matter to the company to some degree. Okay, next question from Lysanda. How to generate confidence in your team and others as they engage with problems using the design process?
So generally, one of the points that I made is that there's no bad ideas, especially during the ideation phase and the prototyping phase. Let the team come up with anything together. Involve your architect, involve your developer, where generally they might come back with, no, this is too complicated to implement. Then you say to them, okay, how would you like to solve this problem? This is the issue. We would like a table that we're able to paste 4 lines of stuff into from Excel. Show me how you might do it. And perhaps they come back with an even better idea. But what might also happen is that when they're trying to solve the problem and drawing it out with you, they realize, actually, the other way is better, and the additional 2-3 hours of code is going to create a lot of value. And then they're in it. Then they understand that it's worth their while, and then they build it. There's a lot of times that, you know, when you're dealing with bugs, which we're dealing with on this project at the moment, you get a call from a developer and they've been busy on the same bug for like 6-7 days, and they say, I just want to understand, is this valuable? You know, and what am I doing to solve the problem? And then you say, you know, you explain where in the system the problem is and how much else it's going to fix. And then they're like, okay, cool, it's worth my time. I'll knuckle down and I'll do it. You know, it's just showing them where their value is and why it's important for them to just be solving this problem. And maybe not always just showing them, like I said, you know, helping them to see it for themselves, see why they're important and why they have to put the effort in.
I really like that. Just taking the team with you on that journey, and helping them to understand why certain things are important to you and to the user.
Yeah.
Cool. Next question. What is the one thing that you wish people would realize about UX and UI design?
Maybe that they're not the same thing. So not every UX designer is also a UI designer. You know, design is designed to the average person. They think, you know, you're making things pretty, but you know, where something being pretty is not the ultimate goal. Your goal, even when you're looking at the simplest app on your phone, it actually doesn't have to be pretty. And I'm sure that you've experienced this before, where something just works and you don't, you know, if they make it look a bit nicer, great. But if it works, you're going to use the one that works over the one that looks good. And although UI design, the goal is to make a person want to click on a button and, you know, not feel scolded when they see a failure notification. UX design really is about making sure that the user continues through the journey, that their problem is solved every step of the way, and they don't give up before your product is actually solving their issue. So it really, you know, it really is something that does go hand in hand, but they are two different things, UI and UX.
Definitely. And I think a talk like this of yours is a very good introduction to people unfamiliar with the field, and that can start to teach the difference between them and why both of them are so important and slightly different. Next question. What is CX versus UX, and how do they relate to each other?
So that's an interesting question, and I think it's always something like how people interpret it. So customer experience is not simply, so to me, this is my understanding of it, and there can be, you know, sometimes people will say that you're a CX designer and they, you know, on a job description, they may put it in there, but there's a lot of UX in there. So, you know, it completely depends how a company understands this. But customer experience, which is CX design, is very much based on a complete journey through a business. So how does the business interact with their client? How do you get the client to come to you? How do you get the client to stay? And if they leave, for example, Netflix, let's say you decide to cancel your contract, you know, how does that process work? And how do you make sure that you leave the door open for them to engage with you? So it's a journey through your whole business, where UX is how a person is using or interacting with a product while they're interacting with it. It isn't so much how do we get this client to interact with our entire range and stay with us as a business.
Definitely true. I'm also working on a talk about CX that I'm giving in a few weeks. And another example that I found quite useful to explain customer experience is if you think about buying a car, Your customer experience doesn't start when you're actually inside the physical car after you've bought it. It starts when you start thinking about, ooh, which brands would I be interested in? So then you maybe think BMW, Volvo, like, ooh, I want to buy a Lamborghini because they're fancy. That's the start of your engagement with this brand. So that's the start of your customer experience. Then you go onto their website, you might go into a car dealership, talk to the salesman on the floor. That's part of the customer experience. After you've bought the car, the services that you get is part of the customer experience. The memory that you have of what it was like to drive the car is part of the customer experience. So if you call the call center to ask them questions, all of these kinds of things all tie into the customer experience. So it could be things in the physical world, the branding, the marketing pamphlets that you receive when you buy the car, the physical booklet that you are paging through when you're trying to figure out what this error message on the car's dashboard means. That's part of the customer experience. So all of that ties in, and it's not just focus on one aspect of it. And as you say, the terminology is becoming more and more blurred, where people are looking at user experience to mean the user experience of everything of this brand. But it is also the customer experience. So the lines between them are becoming more blurred. And within the design industry, we know there's a lot of jargon, and a lot of people use the jargon very differently. So you always have to make sure exactly what someone means when they say a term, because they might have a different understanding of it than you do. It doesn't mean either is right or wrong, because these terms are constantly evolving, as is the industry. And that's it from my side. Does anyone else have any last questions that they would like to ask Chiselle? Oh, Quentin is just saying thank you. More of these talks are needed to put these important aspects of design on the map. Yes, I completely agree. I think more and more we need to talk about design and what it means for business and how it relates to what's important for our customers and our clients, and how we can add value in that regard. So we are definitely going to be holding more of these. I know that there is another design session planned for, I think, sometime next month. We're still ironing out the details on that one. We'll definitely let you know on that. But yes, continue having these conversations, attend meetups on design topics, read blogs on Medium about design topics, engage with us on LinkedIn. We like posting things about design. And the more we talk about this, the more that people become comfortable with where design fits in. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today, Chiselle. I think you have a lot of knowledge, especially from the business space, influencing the way that you approach design. And thank you for sharing your insights and ideas on that.
Thank you so much, Liz. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining today.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. You can go and find the other videos on the DVT Insights page on the DVT website, dvt.co.za. We will see you soon for the next one. Don't forget to check it out. Thank you so much. Goodbye. Have a lovely day further.